Hi, my name is Lindsay Cummings. I am an assistant professor in the Department of Dramatic Arts, and I am the dramaturg for the Connecticut Repertory Theater, which means that I assist our production teams putting together context about the world of the plays, both for the actors and for our audiences, and I do outreach activities and events. And I'm here with Jean Randich.
Yes, and I am the director of the Importance of Being Earnest, which is opening on Friday night.
October the 5th, 6th?
6th.
Friday night is the 6th.
Yes.
October 6th. And the Importance of Being Earnest is part of the Connecticut Repertory Theater season. It's the very first play in our season. We're excited to be opening with it because it's such a wild and wonderful comedy, and Jean's going to tell you a little bit more about it. It's also part of a season where many of the plays in our season are really exploring the theme of lies and lying and why people lie. I'm going to say just a little bit about Oscar Wilde and who he was and why he's so important to theater history and also to queer history, because Jean and I were here doing the Out to Lunch lecture series. So Wilde was an Irishman who was a writer, a brilliant essayist. He was a lecturer. He was part of the aesthetic movement, which was an arts movement in Victorian England and elsewhere that really focused on the notion of art for art's sake and pushed against Victorian morals and repressiveness, and sort of wanted to explore the idea of beauty in absolutely everything, and also the pursuit of pleasure, later sort of associated with the decadent movement, decadence as in the pleasure over duty. Wilde was enormously successful until 1895, when he was brought down in a series of trials about his sexuality. He was accused by a member of the upper class, sort of left a card at Wilde's club that accused him of being a posing sodomite, which was a misspelling of the word sodomite. And Wilde brought a libel suit against this gentleman for defaming his name, but very quickly it was discovered that there was enough evidence against Wilde to prove that the accusation was true. And in a series of trials that followed, Wilde became, instead of the one bringing the suit, the one defending himself. He was found guilty of gross indecency and sentenced to 2 years of hard labor. And it really it crushed him as a human being. It crushed him financially. He had to sell all of his belongings. When he came out of prison, he was penniless, and became sort of attacked in the media. The trials were everywhere. The result of his fall from grace was everywhere. And this attack on his sexuality has made Wilde a figure of interest in queer history for a very long time. So we're going to talk a little bit about the play right now.
Yes. So this is probably one of the greatest comedies ever written, and I think Wilde is one of the greatest playwrights ever to write in the English language. Period of The Importance of Being Earnest debuted on Valentine's Day, 1895, 2 months before he was arrested for the charge of gross indecency. And there's a term that he coins in this play called Bunburying, or a Bunburyist. And what's important, I think, to recognize is because of the passage of the Criminal Law Amendment Act in 1885, sex between men, gross indecency, was outlawed, and therefore Wilde and other homosexuals were forced to lead a double life. They were not allowed to say what they were doing. This functions in the play under the term of Bunburying, which is a behavior, but it's also a way of life, and it's also an identity. It's what you do if you want to pursue your pleasure and you're not allowed to. So one character invents a permanent invalid called Bunbury, whom he has to visit so that he can do what he wants. And this other character, Jack Worthing, invents a brother called Ernest, who's a wicked brother, so that he can go from the country into London to take care of his wicked brother. That's what the men do. What the women do in the play is they write fiction. They imagine their lives the way they want them to, they would like their life to be, and write it in their diaries. It's much more exciting than their actual life is. And what we find out is through the power of their imagination, they actually are able to make what they imagine come true. They have that much power over the men. So I think one of the stunning things about this theatrically is that these characters present archetypes but instantly morph into the opposite or in some way shift. So we're seeing constantly shifting characters. And that really inspired us in this production to make a set that also morphs, shifts, changes. The costumes morph, shift, change. It begins in 1895, but then we seem to be moving into the present day. And we use projections, and I'm just going to say one thing about these projections. They're sourced from the National Health Institute microphotography of cells inside the body. So there is a cell from a mouse retina, which is so amazingly beautiful and complex and intricate, which I feel corresponds with Wilde's love of beauty. He was in the aesthetic movement as a push against industrialization, as a push against realizing that humans were being asked to just be cogs in machines, and he wanted people to experience the fullness and the organic nature of our connection with nature and beauty. So we've tried to reimagine this in a way that doesn't look like we are replicating the forms that it took in 1895, but that is really vital for a contemporary audience watching it now. And so, you know, like with Facebook and the constant updating of status, that's probably our equivalent of the diary writing of the women in the play. But I feel with our extremely wonderful, robust, young, and inclusive cast, it's just a really great way of looking at how this play can have meaning for us today.
And I think when you come see the play, one of the things you want to watch for is how Wilde uses this very standard romantic comedy of manners, heterosexual love story that we're all very familiar with, but manages to imbue in it, in the subtext, all of these ideas about how these challenging the gender norms of those couples, like who's the one really in charge, who's the pursuer, or challenging the notion that heterosexual marriage is actually what everybody really wants, right? And challenging the idea that we can all conform easily. So look for the ways that Wilde is indicating his pushback against Victorian society in a form that still feels very comfortable and very familiar. The show runs at the Jorgensen Theater, October 5th through 15th, and we really hope you'll join us there.
Please come.